Welcome to Walking the Haftarah. I'm Tyler Merwin, and this is Torah Portion, Bo. This week's Torah portion is Exodus 10:1 through 13:16. The Haftarah this week is Jeremiah 46, verses 13 through 28. Bo means come or go, or to enter. As our opening line, it says, Then Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, Go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and of your grandson how I have dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and what signs I have done among them, that you may know that I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Exodus 10, verses 1 and 2. Last week began the plagues on Egypt, and this week they will be completed. So let's do a brief Torah portion overview. Moses and Aaron are again sent to Pharaoh to demand that he release the Hebrews so that they may serve Adonai. The eighth plague of locusts is revealed that will cover the face of the land. They will eat what the hail didn't destroy, and they will eat the trees in the field and fill their houses. Pharaoh's servants plead with Pharaoh to let the people go, saying, Don't you understand that Egypt is ruined? Pharaoh breaks a little bit and asks Moses to go serve Adonai, but he asks, But who's going? Moses replies, All of us, our young and our old, our flocks and our herds. And Pharaoh says he will only release the men because that's what you want. You just want the men to go. And he sends Moses and Aaron away. Moses, at the command of Adonai, stretches his staff over the land. And we're told that Adonai brings an east wind that blew all that day and all the night. As we've discussed before, east wind typically means divine judgment, and in this case, it means locusts. The locusts literally darkened the land and devoured every green thing. Pharaoh hastily calls Moses and Aaron back to stop the plague, admitting that he had sinned to Adonai and to Moses. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh turned the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in all the country of Egypt. But Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go. Exodus 10, verses 19 and 20. Adonai then tells Moses to stretch out his hands toward the heaven, and a thick darkness shall cover the land, a darkness that can be felt. This darkness lasted for 3 whole days, but the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. Pharaoh again calls Moses and Aaron and tells them that they can go serve Adonai with all of their people this time. But, he says, they have to leave back their flocks and their herds. Moses tells them, well, that ain't going to work. They have to go too. Adonai hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he became more defiant than ever. Pharaoh even threatens Moses' life if he ever seeks out Pharaoh again, which Moses will not need to do. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, Yet one more plague I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you away completely. Exodus 11, verse 1. He tells the people to ask all of their Egyptian neighbors for gold and silver. Some of your translations will say vessels, or most will say jewelry. And actually the Hebrew word can be either or and probably means both. So vessels and jewelry. Adonai granted them favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and Moses was also seen as very great in the land. So Moses said, Thus says Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, About midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle. There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there has never been, nor ever will be again. But not a dog shall growl against any of the people of Israel, either man or beast, that ye may know that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Exodus 11, verses 4 through 7. The text says that this will happen about midnight. Now, to understand a little bit about ancient time and how it's reckoned, they did kind of have 24 hours. They really had more of a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night. So all throughout the Bible, when they're giving you hours of the day or the night, it's reckoned that way. So the whole idea is the entire from sundown to sunup for the darkness was actually divided into 12 equal parts, and the same thing for the daylight, 12 equal parts. So in the middle of the summertime, the daylight hours were actually longer than 60 minutes that we know today, and the night hours were shorter. And the exact opposite in the middle of winter, you would have long dark hours, and you would have very short light hours. So Moses then leaves Pharaoh after he proclaims that all his servants will beg Moses and Israel to leave. And actually, it even says that Moses leaves in hot anger. Adonai hardens Pharaoh's heart, and he will not let Israel go. Then Adonai sets a new calendar for Israel. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you." Exodus 12, verses 1 and 2. This month, which we are later told is called Abib, which is a Hebrew word that means in the ear or the greening of crops, will also be referred later in the Bible as the month of Nisan. This beginning of months is setting the religious calendar that begins in Nisan, month 1, and will end with Adar, month 12. But this is not when the year changes. The year changes actually in the 7th month, the month of Tishri, which is the Hebrew civil calendar. And that's when Rosh Hashanah, the turning of the year, actually happens. So it sounds a little different, but it's not very different from what we know today. We have our regular year on our calendar, but if you're in school or you're a school teacher, you have a school year that doesn't usually start at the first of the year. It has its own start and stop. Also, if you're in business, you'll have a physical calendar. And usually a business can set up whatever they want to start. They can start from May 1st to May 1st, and that's their physical calendar. So it's the same kind of thing. But Adonai's calendar actually starts, both the civil and the religious start either at the beginning of the spring feast or the beginning of the fall feast. So it's actually kind of mirror one another. Next, we are told that Israel was to take a lamb on the 10th of this first month, a lamb for a household. It's to be a male, a year old, without blemish. This lamb is mostly referred to as a sheep, but a goat was also acceptable. And you can find that in Exodus 12, verse 5. They're to keep this lamb with them from the 10th of the month to the 14th of the month, where the whole assembly of Israel will slaughter their lambs at twilight, which actually literally means between the evenings. This term is actually understood to be between the 9th and the 12th hour of the day, which would equate to around between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. in our modern reckoning. During the 4 days that the lamb was in the home, it was examined to ensure it was without defect, which would be a suitable sacrifice to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. All of these details are critical as they point to the perfect Lamb of God, the one who takes away the sins of the world. Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted on the fire. With unleavened bread and bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted, its head with its legs and its inner parts. You shall let none of it remain until morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. Exodus 12, verses 7 through 10. After the blood was applied, everything was eaten or burned in fire. Here we also see the key elements for the Passover or Pesach Seder: the matzah, unleavened bread, and the maor, which is the bitter herbs. They are also told that they are to eat it with their belts fastened, with their sandals on their feet, and their staves in their hands, and that they were to eat this in haste. Unlike all the other Passover Seders that would come each year after this, they were not to relax this time. They had to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Exodus 12, verses 12 through 13. They are told that this will be for you a memorial, a statute that shall be kept throughout your generations, a statute that will last forever. Next, we are given the details for the Feast of Matzah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is a 7-day feast beginning at sundown from Passover that began at twilight on the 14th and will go through the 21st of the month. Everyone is to remove the leaven from their houses for this period, and anyone who eats what is leavened during this time, it's said that his soul shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day, which will be the 15th, and on the last day, which will be the 21st, you shall have a holy convocation. These rules apply to both the native-born Israelites and those who sojourn with them. The last commandment is that you actually eat matzah, not just abstain from the leaven. Moses reinforces that the people select their lambs when they are slaughtered, and they are to dip hyssop in the blood and apply it to the doorposts and the lintels of their home. And when your children say to you, "What do you mean by this service?" you shall say, "It is the sacrifice of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's Passover, for he passed over the houses of the people of Israel in Egypt, when he struck the Egyptians but spared our houses, and the people bowed their heads and worshipped." Exodus 12, verses 26 and 27. Next, we get the very sobering words. At midnight, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Exodus 12, verses 29 and 30. Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron and tells them to take all of the Israel and their flocks and their herds and to go. He also asks them to bless him. The Egyptians sent out Israel with urgency, for they feared that they would also die. The text says that they had gathered much gold and silver, vessels and jewelry and clothing. And it says by doing this that they plundered the Egyptians. So the Exodus begins. About 600,000 men on foot is what the text tells us, besides women and children. The estimated total is close to 3 million souls. We're next told that Israel was in Egypt 430 years, and exactly 430 years to the day they left Egypt. Now, Abraham was told at the covenant of the pieces, back in Genesis 15, that his offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. They will suffer affliction, but Adonai will judge that nation, and they will come out with great possessions. It's believed that the 430 years is from this actual decree to the actual Exodus. The actual physical time that they spent in Egypt is thought to be about 210 years. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the statute of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat of it, but every slave that is bought for money may eat of it after you have circumcised him. No foreigner or hired worker may eat of it." This is a covenant meal meant only for those who are in covenant with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And any slave that was actually bought with money was considered to be part of the family. And so you would be treated just like one of the sons as far as the covenant goes. Just like Abraham with his servant Eliezer. Actually, Eliezer would, if Abraham didn't have a child, would have been the inheritance of his house. So Adonai tells them that for every firstborn male, both of man and beast, are to be consecrated to him. Firstborn sacrificial animals, those that are clean animals, are to be given to Adonai for sacrifice. and unclean animals like a donkey are to be redeemed by a lamb or to have their neck broken. All firstborns of Israel are to be redeemed. That's all the firstborn boys. This is to show forth forever what God did to Pharaoh and to Egypt when he delivered Israel with a strong hand. And this brings us to our Haftarah portion this week, Jeremiah 46, verses 13 through 28. Last week, our Haftarah was from the prophet Ezekiel that focused on Egypt being defeated by King Nebuchadnezzar, a defeat that was orchestrated by the Holy One himself. This is the same time period that Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem and eventually destroyed it, a judgment against Judah from Adonai. This week, we get that same prophecy of judgment on Egypt, except from a different prophet. Jeremiah is a contemporary of Ezekiel, and is thought to have written the books of Jeremiah, the books of Kings, 1st and 2nd, and the book of Lamentation, with the help, of course, of his trusty scribe and disciple, Baruch. Jeremiah remained in Judah through its destruction and was not taken away to Babylon like his fellow prophet Ezekiel was. The word that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Jeremiah the prophet about the coming of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to strike the land of Egypt. Declare in Egypt and proclaim in Migdol, proclaim in Memphis and Tahpanhes. Say, stand ready and be prepared, for the sword shall devour around you. Jeremiah 46, verses 13 and 14. Just like Adonai executed judgment on Egypt in our Torah portion, so he proclaims it again, but this time through Nebuchadnezzar. Why are your mighty ones face down? They do not stand because Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh thrust them down. He made many stumble, and they fell. And they said to one another, Arise, let us go back to our own people, and to the land of our birth, because the sword of the oppressor. Call the name of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, noisy one who lets the hour go by. Verses 15 through 17. Nebuchadnezzar himself is the sword of the oppressor, and all of Pharaoh's allies are fleeing back to their lands because the mighty king of Babylon. It's thought that Pharaoh Necho at this time feared the might of Nebuchadnezzar, but he still liked to talk a big game. As I live, declares the king, whose name is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, like Tabor among the mountains, and like Carmel by the sea, shall one come. Prepare yourselves baggage for exile, O inhabitants of Egypt. For Memphis shall become a waste, a ruin without inhabitant. A beautiful heifer is Egypt, but a biting fly from the north has come upon her. Even her higher soldiers in her midst are like fattened calves. Yes, they have turned and fled together. They did not stand, for the day of their calamity has come upon them, the time of their punishment. Verses 18 through 21. Adonai declares himself as the king, in contrast to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Even Egypt's mercenaries are equated to fatted calves, ripe for the slaughter. As we saw before, all of her allies are abandoning Egypt. She makes a sound like a serpent gliding away, for her enemies march in force and come against her with axes like those who fell trees. They shall cut down her forest, declares Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, though it is impenetrable, because they are more numerous than locusts. They are without number. The daughter of Egypt shall be put to shame. She shall be delivered into the hand of the people from the north. Verses 22 to 24. In Ezekiel, Pharaoh was equated to a great dragon or a great sea serpent. And likewise here, he is also equated to a serpent. Moses and Aaron's first encounter with Pharaoh actually involved throwing down their staves, which became serpents. But you'll remember that the staff of Pharaoh was eaten by the staff of Aaron. And it's showing here again that he will not prevail. Her forest and her trees are symbolic of Pharaoh's army, which will be cut down by Nebuchadnezzar. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, the God of Israel, said, Behold, I am bringing punishment upon Ammon of Thebes, and Pharaoh, and Egypt, and her gods, and her kings, upon Pharaoh and those who trust in him, I will deliver them into the hand of those who seek their life, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and his officers. Afterward, Egypt shall be inhabited as in the days of old, declares Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, verses 25 and 26. Even though it's the face of Nebuchadnezzar, his success is because Adonai is actually using him for his own purposes. Egypt will be re-inhabited, but will never be the world power that she once was. But fear not, O Jacob, my servant, nor be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from far away, and your offspring from the land of their captivity. Jacob shall return and have quiet and ease, and none shall make him afraid. Fear not, O Jacob, my servant, declares Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, for I am with you. I will make a full end of all the nations to which I have driven you. But of you I will not make a full end. I will discipline you in just measure, and I will by no means leave you unpunished. Verses 27 and 28. The sage Rashi is known for pointing out textual anomalies and finding out exactly what they might mean. In verse 27, where it states that Jacob shall return, Jacob's name has an extra letter added to it, a Vav. Rashi noticed that this actually happened in Jacob's name actually 5 times in the Tanakh, and this is one of those times. Rashi also noticed that the name of Elijah had a Vav actually removed from his name 5 times as well. So they see a connection to where 5 Vavs were taken from Elijah's name in 5 different locations and given to Jacob's name. Since Elijah is to herald the coming of the Messiah, they see these incidents as having future messianic expectations. That Jacob, in some ways in those texts, are heralding the Messiah. So even though Jeremiah is speaking to those who are going to be exiled in Babylon, he is also speaking to us who are exiled among the nations, awaiting Elijah to proclaim Yeshua coming again. Yeshua will deliver us from our captivity, and the nations who oppressed us will be punished by the Most High. Put your trust in the Lamb, for He is coming to deliver us. I pray this teaching has been edifying. Let's lift up the name of the Holy One. With love and Assad, Shalom.